firstly, I was like, what have I done when I wrote this track? So what have I created? This, which is the same for quite a lot of tracks that I've written over the years, where I'm just like, is there a reason no one's done this before? Maybe.
Hey everyone, welcome to Season 4 of EDM Matters. We took a little break after our final episode of 2020, but we are back already this year with our biggest guest yet, Flux Pavilion. An accomplished DJ producer and co-founder of Circus Records, Flux Pavilion just released a new album called .wav, and we're going to be getting an exclusive look at one of the new album tracks later on this episode. But first, Flux, I gotta say it's a pleasure to have you. How are you doing today?
I am doing fine. I reckon.
I think fine is the best anyone can ask for these days.
Yeah, very English. I feel like as a Brit, when someone asks me how am I doing, I don't say I'm good, I say I'm not bad. I'm in a pretty good space. Album's coming out in, I guess when this goes out, the album's out now already, right? So yeah, album's come out.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Everyone's loving it. And it's the best thing I've ever done. So
yeah,
can't complain.
I have had the album from your publicist for I think a couple of months now, and I was wondering if you could tell me what the sort of catalyst was for the change, or what finally made you go, it's time for something new.
Well, it's been happening slowly. So if you go through my catalogue, even on Lines in Wax, there was a track called Haunt You, which had Haunt You could fit on the new album. It's obviously a bit more dated in terms of production, but in terms of some of the musical ideas, it sort of fits. And then Standing on a Hill and Freeway, and there's been all sorts of moments on like Scientist and stuff. Like I have been effectively doing this, but not loud enough. I think somewhere along the way, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I became typecast as a dubstep DJ. And I definitely leaned into that, played a lot of dubstep in my sets, have really enjoyed writing and producing dubstep. But even from the day one, I didn't really do it like everyone else. I kind of... And I think that was the strength of Flux Pavilion. Whereas it was always looked as if I was taking dubstep in a different direction. But it never felt like that to me. I was just writing music. And I really liked dubstep at the time, so it sounded a lot like that. But to me, it always felt like I was writing big electronic hip hop. And so I guess what I'm saying is that I don't think there really was a big change on this album, apart from I just decided to go for it.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think it's really important as an artist to be true to yourself. I've seen so many artists get into that sort of rut of just being beholden to, what the fans expect them to be, and they turn out, and then it happens more sharply where they're like, okay, I've been lying to myself, and now I'm going to do something completely different. And then they alienate some of their fans. But as you said, you've been doing it sort of gradually. I'm looking through your Spotify right now. And, even Pull the Trigger, Savage with Max, and Weathen, Feel Your Love. There's been a lot of...
There's a lot of off-kilter stuff. I feel like I do come across people that are like, oh yeah, Flux Pavilion, Bass Cannon. And it's like, I actually only did that one. If you hear like our Louder remix, there's loads of notes and chords and harmonies, and then a heavy section. That was it was Flux Pavilion section, Dr. P section, and we didn't touch it. So that's why that song sounds like you go from a melodic block to a heavy block, is because it was exactly the way that we wrote it. And the things that I like to do were, like I say, stuff like Haunt You and Super Bad, and I just always wanted to build on electronic music and think outside the box of like, what can this music be? And I think a lot of artists who think that way tends to go down a more ambient route. So I love this music, but I still want to move it into see what places it can go. And that's why we ended up writing tracks like What's Up, which is just the weirdest dance floor trap song you'll ever hear. And it just I was just like, I want to do dance floor music, but I want to do it in a way that no one else is. I basically had loads of tracks, and I had probably, I reckon, around 2018, I felt like it had run its course, and I had loads of other stuff I wanted to write and all sorts of things, and I just had got so tired of being in this little kind of dubstep box, and I was just like, where do I write from here? It feels like there's no way I can dig to get myself out of this little hole where everything has to revolve around these really simplistic elements, which I really enjoyed for so many years, but after a while I sort of ended up feeling quite stuck. So I was like, well, maybe that's it, you know? Maybe that's the end of Flux Pavilion. I'm happy to move on. I never think we should hold on to something and keep something going if it doesn't feel right. And it didn't feel right, so I moved on and started writing music of whatever I felt like on the day. That's kind of how I've always written music, but sort of leaned more into that, where I'd come in, and if I wanted to write, if I started playing on my keyboard and it sounded like an acoustic country type song, then that's the song that I would end up writing. So like You and I, for instance, all of that came from just one day I was sitting there playing guitar, and then I started building up, and then I was like, oh, a drop could happen here, and I just ended up writing it. And I sat and listened to it and was like, this was not meant to be Flux Pavilion, but it is now. I couldn't help myself. And that's how all the tracks really came together, is I just wanted to write whatever music just came from my gut. And I ended up sat there with 20 songs that sounded like and felt like Flux Pavilion. And I was like, damn, that's it then. Flux Pavilion isn't dead. It's there, it's in me, and it always has been all along, and I stumbled across it accidentally. But yeah, at no point was I sitting down being like, I've got to write a Flux Pavilion album, it's got to be great. It was actually the exact opposite, and I feel like there's another 10 years in Flux Pavilion now, because now I've opened the gate into this expanse of literally being able to do absolutely anything, and I'm like, fuck, this is bigger than I could have imagined, this opportunity. And and this album's just the start of it. This album is me discovering that I have so much more to say, and now I'm really excited to start saying all that stuff.
So I mean, you mentioned sort of like the end of Flux Pavilion in 2018, and obviously you're still here, but did you ever at any point consider retiring the name and doing a new project, like releasing this album under a different name, even Josh Steele?
There has been a few other projects that I've worked on as well. There's a thing I've done a full album with Turin Breaks, who feature on I Will Stay and Cut Me Out, and that should be happening at some point this year too. And I've produced an album for a punk band called Peng Shui, and both of those projects I was like, cool, I'll do this under Joshua Steele as just me. I want to keep Flux Pavilion away. And as this album started growing and turning into what it is, I just kind of realised that Flux Pavilion is me, and it's only my own actions that put it in a box. So I'm just going to attach whatever I do. I'm starting to think up a soundtrack, an ambient soundtrack for a board game that I really love. I play it all the time, and it's great. And I always put music on, and there's this perfect sound that I'm looking for as a soundtrack to this board game, and it's like ambient vampire music. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to write that and release it under Flux Pavilion, because why can't Flux Pavilion do an ambient vampire album? What's stopping me? If I'm making all these steps away from where I thought I was stuck, I can literally do anything.
You recently posted on Twitter about some of the moments that you remembered when writing the album. Other than the ones you mentioned on Twitter, what are some of the moments you can think of where you said to yourself, I'm really proud of what I've just done?
I'd written a different album. I'd done 2025 I Will Stay, Somebody Else, all the tracks that we'd talked about.
Yeah.
And that was the first half of an album, and that was when I kind of realised, I was like, shit, there's a Flux Pavilion album here, I better write the rest of it. And I wrote a whole series of tracks, and they all sounded like old Flux Pavilion to me. And it changed the whole context of the whole album. And I realised that I was actually writing music just to get some Flux Pavilion material together, and it's completely at odds with the rest of it. And I didn't realise I was feeling increasingly underwhelmed with how the album was going until Anamanaguchi put their new album out. And I listened to that from start to finish, and it's such an amazing body of work that I would listen to it on my headphones on the way to the studio on my bike. And one day I just got to the studio and I was like, I'm going to delete my album and start again. That's what has to happen. And so excited by that, I wrote the track Love in one day and got home with that track, and it felt like as if I could hold the track, it was something really precious. I was like, this is it. This sound and this feeling, that is my album that I want to write. And then all the rest of the tracks that you've heard, so like I Believe, Sink Your Teeth In, You and I, they all kind of grew from that one moment where I kind of basically, in the same way as I felt like I was kind of doing with my career, by throwing it in the bin, by being like, that's over, okay, Flux Pavilion's over, now what? Rather than it being a really kind of like bleak, despair-filled moment, it's actually really freeing, because you can just, I was like, right, this album isn't right, throw it in the bin. Now what? I will just write some music then, I guess. And then it came together, and I just remember that being a massive turning point. It would be a completely different conversation that we're having there now. It would kind of be like a conversation about just a new Flux Pavilion album, rather than a conversation about a new Flux Pavilion, which I think is really important.
But yeah, I mean, this has all been very, very enlightening, but I want to move into our track overview. You're going to show us, we're going to do this in a second, you're going to show us Partial Fugue in B minor, which is one of my, when I first heard that on the album, was one of my favorite tracks. I immediately heard that and I was just like, this is incredible. Yeah. So we will be right back with Flux Pavilion and Partial Fugue in B minor. Don't go anywhere. It's been a pleasure speaking with Flux Pavilion so far. We're going to have a little bit more for you as we go through Partial Fugue in B minor, one of the new songs from his album .wav. So I'm looking here at my screen. You're producing in Cubase, which is a little, I would say a little foreign for some producers who are more familiar with Fruity Loops, FL Studio, or Ableton. So I assume you've been producing in Cubase for a long time if you're so comfortable with it now.
Yeah, the entire time. I got Cubase SX1 when I was, can't even remember how old. I started on Reason, actually. But what I would do is I would bounce loops from Reason and then map them out in Cool Edit Pro, which is now called Adobe Audition. And then Dr. P stumbled across, I've known Dr. P since I was like 12, and he stumbled across Cubase, and I was like, well, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. And now I absolutely swear by it.
Gotcha. Well, let's get into the track. So like I mentioned before, I've had this album for a little while, and Partial Fugue in B minor was always one of the standout tracks for me just because of the creativity and freshness of the song. And so let's start from the beginning. It opens up and we have this voice saying, and now we continue our show with the performance of Flux Pavilion's Partial Fugue in B minor, which is clearly like an homage to like that sort of classical sound, and a conductor or presenter saying and our next song is. But like how did you come up with the idea to like add that into the track?
So I'll play it first. That's this little bit here.
Yes.
And now we continue our show with a performance of Flux Pavilion's Partial Fugue in B minor.
So it's from Fiverr.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I basically I'd written all the chords and written the idea. So I guess the core concept of the song was to take. I'm just trying to go back to the start. I wonder where I came up with it. I was listening to Bach, who is famous for using the Fugue compositional kind of platform, I guess, structure. And yeah, Bach is like the most popular fugueist. And I just the way the chords kept moving, they keep developing, and I just kind of thought, I wonder if I could get away with that many chords in a big dance floor song, because it's like this is the most classic Flux Pavilion of all the tracks on the album, I think. But I wanted to go one further than I've ever gone before. Yeah, I'll play the chord sequence here.
Yeah.
So it's quite a traditional sequence. I definitely didn't break any boundaries. Like, I think
Yes.
it feels quite original to be delivered in this context, but
Yes. Yes.
yeah, as a compositional sequence, it each chord, you know what the next chord's going to be. It's that kind of sequence where it just like it's willing you forwards into a nice rounded completion at the end.
It hits these like already expected notes, and you're like, yes, that's the one, that's the next one, yes, 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 and it does it. It's very pleasing. Yeah, it makes sense.
So the the first bit I wrote with the sequence is this lead line here. So that was the bit that I wrote first, is the lead line over the top. I drew directly from Bach's work and just wrote a running line that runs through the sequence, basically, which is effectively half of a fugue, which is why the track is called Partial Fugue, because the real a fugue actually comes into a counterpoint, is where you've got that melody running, but then counterpoint, you'd have another melody that runs alongside it as a counterpoint. So it's kind of like a harmony, but not really a direct harmony. And the reason it's called Partial Fugue is when we go into the second section, this is the lead that I have for that. And then halfway through this section, a counterpoint melody comes in. So that little bit there, which is the second half of the B section, that only happens for about 20 seconds. So for about 20 seconds, this track is a fugue, a technical and compositionally correct fugue. But the rest of the time, it's just derivative of Bach's like predominant work. So that's why it's called Partial Fugue, and the track's in B minor. So I was just like, firstly, I was like, what have I done when I wrote this track? So what have I created? This, which is the same for quite a lot of tracks that I've written over the years, where I'm just like, is there a reason no one's done this before? Maybe. Maybe there is, because it's wild. But
Yeah.
After a while of listening to it, and then I started placing it in my new live set and stuff, I was like, you know what, this is rad. I wouldn't. It's not going to change the world, but I do think in the context, it's a remarkable piece of work. No one's ever really done anything like this before, in our field. So I'm like, cool. I'm pretty proud of myself there, but also it's quite silly. So I'm kind of doubling down on both of those ideas with that little vocal sample.
So let's skip ahead a little bit to the key change in the second drop, because for up until that point, it's, it has a consistent sound, and then there's the break and like the ghostly voice, which you told me that is your voice that you're sort of ethereally singing on the track.
So yeah, well, for the main track, let's go back to the start. We've got quite a typical Flux Pavilion-esque sort of thing, big chords. Mm-hmm. That's my Gold Dust preset, which in a track like this, the reason all of the songs I do like this sound the same is because I use the exact same preset, because somewhere along the way I stumbled across this harmonic rasping sound that just fits into this style perfectly. So yeah, that's in there. There's a little bit of guitar. And those sounds kind of carry on through into the second section here. So yeah, it's really defined by, I'd say, this sound. And yeah, other than those elements, a lot of it's all just kind of drums that makes it seem, if the project seems like it's big, it's just loads of layered drum samples. The actual main core of what makes the song what it is just this little collection. There's this guitar in here. So yeah, it's a pretty simply constructed song. It might only be simple to me because I've been kind of doing this for 10 years, making huge chords. It's definitely a thing that I've perfected. So as far as I'm concerned, this is just like another day at the office. Instead, it has much more adventurous chords. And then
I would adventurous being definitely one of the words I would use. I think that a lot of producers would listen to this and be like, okay, I need, like, if I heard this as a producer, I'd be like, okay, I need to step my game up, which I think is which I would think is a compliment to a producer, another producer going, okay, I need to be better.
For sure, that's actually the biggest compliment ever. So I appreciate hearing that. To me, I'm just like, oh yeah, you know what, I've just done the same things I always do. But it's because I love doing it. This is very much my favourite sound. Having all like a chord, a big stack, and then a really weighty kick drum underneath it is just such a great sound. Because a thing I always do is I make sure each chord change is accentuated by a kick drum. So that's why a lot of my tracks have that quite very definite rhythm, because each time a chord changes, I want a kick drum there. It's like when you're playing the drums, you want a cymbal every time you do that kick on the first beat. I like to have a kick when I change chords, because it feels like I'm playing the drums, and I'm just like, putting my whole into it. So yeah, that's the vibe I play it as. So. Yeah, a massive fan of this sound. So yeah, then we go into a breakdown. Thank you. So this song is so much about the compositional progression that I wanted to build on the progression rather than take away from it, which is where singing comes in. That makes it a lot easier. So yeah, so we've got this vocal here. Which feels to me like it's kind of delivering the same concept with the chords. It feels very comforting, especially the it's exactly what you want to hear. When I play those chords, when I was playing the chords on my keyboard, you know, it's just what I'm screaming to sing. My body's just like it's everything that I needed to do. So I was like, you know what? That has to go in there. So yeah, there is a key change in it.
Oh, we didn't get to the key change.
And I'll play it real quick just to end us off.
Okay.
So yeah, a very classic two semitone up key change, which I've never done in a song before, and I heard it again on the Anamanaguchi album. They had a key change, and I'm like, how did you get away with that? And I just realised while writing this album that I'd constructed myself this little cave of where you can do this and you can't do that, and that's so anti the message for me. So with this album, I was like, I'm just going to do it, all the things I've never done, and a key change is one of them. Which is why, this song. If you want strange, classical, dance floor music with a key change that doesn't really belong, partial fugue in B minor, that's the song for you. It's right here, coming on today on .wav, my new album.
Yes. So I guess, again, thank you so much for walking us through this. I'm glad we were able to get to the key change because that's one of my favorite parts of the song. But go listen to .wav right now because it's absolutely incredible. And thank you again, Flux Pavilion, for coming onto the show, speaking with us, and giving us some of your insight. We truly appreciate it.
Nice. Thank you very much for having me. And I'll continue to write stuff. So we can continue talking about it, I guess. We'll go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, from us here at EDM Matters, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Austin, one of the producers of EDM Matters. We hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You can also check out our previous episode right here. We hope you enjoy what our channel has to offer.